Welcome to Natural Recovery from Suffering. This is Scott Killaby. I'm going to really simplify for those who don't yet. Grok is probably the better word, and you won't grok it after this either. Because to grok it means to really get it to experience it. The embodied freedom, the real freedom in life where you don't suffer. But you can start to understand really start to understand better how emotional repression is producing suffering if I can slow everything down. And the reason I'm doing that is because a few people that I started to train, they went really deep into the work, and then they went back to some of their non-dual friends and other people in different forms of spirituality, and they saw the bypass there, but those people didn't. And he said, it's like, he said, Scott, what you and Dan have created, it's hard to express it to people that what they're doing is a bypass and they don't know it. And that when you bring it up to them, they may even get defensive because the very repression that drives their bypass, their buried emotions, would make them defensive or feel ashamed if you said, hey, do you know that practice that you're doing is just how you're avoiding buried emotions? It was because these trainees came to me and said, wow, I'm having difficulty talking to my friends or these people. Or, so many people have conversations with their teachers. They go back to their teachers and they say, hey, I've been doing KI and I think what you're doing is a bypass and that you taught me to avoid emotions. I want to talk to you about it because I think maybe you're doing it. And hey, these conversations are going on all the time, actually, and have been for years. And what it's taught me, and just recently, trainees coming to say this, of all things, it's taught me to come back here on social media and slow this down because there really is a disconnect. It's so true. And I thought it was just me because when I was I was the first one sharing about the insights that KI brings. I was the first one publicly to share it. Dan wasn't yet on social media for the first 3 or 4 years that I was talking about repression. Others came through KI, and they're going to experience the same thing too. And Dan is, I think, already, which is this. When you do this work, you just want to share what you want to share. You don't want to share what other people want. But I'm learning that for people to really grok this subject better, I have to give them what they want. And one of the requests, somebody said, well, why don't you just get on the podcast and really break it down simply how people's suffering is connected to emotional repression? And I said, I've already done that on a few podcast episodes, but especially the one called All Your Suffering is Connected to One Thing. But I said, I will break it down even if I can break it down simpler. And I promise to keep it within a 1 hour period. So here we go. I'm not going to take you through inquiry. I'm just going to explain to you that if you did this inquiry, this is what you would find. Or if you did, you would see that repression is there, Because if I took you through the inquiry, it would be like a 2 hour podcast because sitting and feeling into the body and asking questions, it takes a while. But if you're interested, we'll show you how to do that. Let me just say it this way. Say, if you were to say, as you had awareness down into the body, I'm not depressed. And then you would feel something in the body as if it were trying to prove that you were depressed. And it would, if you had like depression or something like that. If you said, I'm not in pain, and you would feel that. If you said, I'm not anxious, you would feel something. And a lot of time it would be contraction deep in the body. You might feel pain or anxiety or depression at the surface, but I'm talking about something deep in the body. If you felt into the body and you said, deep into where the dense sensations are in the body, the sense of separation, and you said, I'm not depressed, and you felt something, a contraction. Why is that? Or if you said, I'm not suffering, and you felt something. Or, I'm not angry, and you felt something. Like as if your body's saying, yes, you're angry, but it would be contraction, see? If you said, I'm not hurt, as you looked at people, or I'm not angry, and you felt that contraction. See, the more you say these reverse inquiries, that's my point. There's the first takeaway. Just do reverse inquiry in your life from now until the next, month or two. If you really care about this work, start there. That's where Dan and I started, is just going around in life and saying, I'm not hurt by her. When you pull away from someone and feel into the body and then sit and just witness everything that comes up. And say, I'm not angry. Witness everything that comes up. If whatever you believe is true about your experience in that moment, just say the opposite. So say, if you think this is an awful day, say, this is a great day, as you feel deep into the body, and then just watch and allow it all. And I want you to notice how your system just keeps producing suffering. That's all. If you don't learn this, your system will keep producing suffering in relationship and in life, and you won't see where it's coming from. But if you do this, just to feel it, you can witness it and even get some freedom from this practice. So the practice is just this. Whatever you believe or whatever you think you're feeling, just reverse that belief or idea or identity and see what comes up. So let's say you're walking down the street and you're starting to feel like there's something wrong with you. So then just say the opposite. There's nothing wrong with me, as you feel down deep into the body. And then just watch and listen from awareness as every thought, feeling, sensation comes and goes. Just let it all come and go. The reason that I'm giving you this invitation is the same reason I give it on my YouTube channel. If you take reverse inquiry in your life and just start watching things come up, of course it's going to help you because you're pulling things up from the unconscious and just allowing them. But it won't go deep enough, most likely, unless you're really skillful, to the buried emotions. So you can put that aside for a second. The practice I just gave you will not get to emotional repression. I developed the third dimension with Dan, the third dimension repression inquiry from these things that I just showed you, but you have to tweak them a certain way. But so the reason I'm giving you this is for a different reason. Is even though it'll give you freedom, you'll experience if you really sit and allow everything to come and go. You'll feel more and more freedom, of course. Anytime we're aware and we allow is good. But here's the key, is I want to say to you right now, the fact that you can even produce that suffering is the thing that we focus on in third dimension repression inquiry, ending that suffering, such that basically we're making it, you're probably thinking, well, isn't that the point of the inquiries, Scott, that you just gave us? The reverse inquiries? And I'll say no, because you're not getting to emotional repression. I'll explain that, and then I'm going to explain how suffering itself comes from repression. But I want you to understand this first. A lot of the inquiry styles in the world, like these inquiries I just gave you, are a bypass. Do not be fooled. I would not say this about our own work. Dan and I would not say this about I would not do that if it were not true. Because why would I do that to like books that I sell or things that people find of mine on the internet from a few years ago that are a bypass? I don't really have a good interest in doing that. I am not doing this for promotional reasons. I'm telling you, there's a bypass And this is what this will show you. But here's the key. You will experience some freedom from this. That's one ingredient of a bypass, is that it works just well enough to fool you into thinking you're really getting free. But you're not. No, because if you don't get to emotional repression, you don't experience the real freedom, because that's the driver of a lot of suffering. According to science and your own body, but you have to know how to work with that. And that's the actual inquiry of 3D, which is not the stuff that I just gave you. The stuff I just gave you will show you that you have suffering, and a lot of suffering you didn't even know you had. Because, it's like reverse inquiry is like it plucks things out of the unconscious. But actually, that stuff can be endless. You have to be very careful. You could just keep plucking and plucking and plucking because you're not plucking the right things out. I don't know what's a good metaphor? It'd be like, the garden metaphor. So if I just sit there and pluck out the flowers or the weeds on the surface, it's good. Just keep doing that. But no, until I pluck the roots out from under the ground, that is not going to work. Plucking at the top, at the surface, it will be an endless thing. And the same is true for these inquiries that I just gave you, even though I just gave them to you. If you went about your life and you're just walking around and you thought, I really don't like myself that much. And then you turn that around into a reverse inquiry. I like myself very much. Feeling down deep into the body, just witnessing it all, allowing it all. I don't want you to just pay attention to whatever freedom or peace or whatever pain or whatever you experience in all that. You're going to experience that anyway. I want you to pay attention to something else. The very fact that you can turn something around and so much stuff comes up, or you feel that so much in your body. And I want you to pay attention to contraction, if you will. Just that sense of separation and how strong that is when you reverse an inquiry like that, whatever it may be. And just feel how this stuff comes from like something deep in the body. Even though you see thoughts and feelings at the surface, of course, words, pictures, and awareness, emotions that are not repressed in awareness. I want you to notice the contraction that comes every time you reverse something, which just shows that there's a lot of suffering there that is still hidden. And ultimately, the suffering that's hidden is buried emotion, something very raw, which is like buried anger, hurt, fear, sadness, and that's it. That's the root of it. Now, how do we know that this buried emotion is actually the root of our suffering? Well, you can read the science. There's a whole bunch of it. But that's not enough to get in our experience. So if someone were to go out and just really discover whether all their suffering is connected to emotional repression, they would have to do this or something like this. So when we're depressed, for example, if you have to notice that when you're depressed, you're often not angry. A lot of depressed people are not angry. Where's the anger? If someone was depressed, if I had them here, I would say, go into that deep, sense of separation in your body, and maybe into the core where the depression is, that sense in the body where you hold the depression. And say, I'm not depressed. Just like I said, this is an example. And when it comes up, their system would come up and say, yeah, it would have stories. Like, my life sucks, or I feel this way about myself, or what's the point, or this feeling, or... we could sit there and watch everything, but that's not what I would do with them. Because that would just be a bypass to sit and watch that, as I said. What I would say is, okay, then if sadness came up, if hurt or whatever came up, if anxiety came up, if this story came up, what I would notice is What didn't come up is whatever's in the contraction, deep in the body. So I take them into that and I would say, pull up your mom and dad and partner and all that. And as you're feeling down deep into the body, say, I'm not angry. Because that's the thing that's missing in that depression. And then they'd say, I'm not angry. And then probably that contraction would contract because they're holding that buried anger there. And they wouldn't feel the anger because it's buried. It's frozen emotion. So they would just feel that contraction response. And then I would show them through the process of actually doing inquiry that is buried anger. Behind the depression, it's actually producing it. They're depressed. Their system is safer. It's safer for them to experience the depression than it is to actually feel and express anger to their loved ones. It's that simple, actually, in words. But our consciousness hides the repression from us. A depressed person, the last place they would look was, oh, I'm going to go get angry at everyone. See that, unless it's a kind of depression that has anger in it, of course, or some bipolar extreme that has, but those are more complicated situations, also often driven by trauma and repression, though. So we're not ever far from this whole subject of how emotional repression and the fear of feeling and expressing what's true is driving suffering. The key is, how do you discover it? So that's what I would do with a person. You have to learn to do it for yourself, but I just want you guys to understand it. So let's say somebody came to me and they had anxiety. I'm not a doctor or a therapist. I don't need to diagnose, and I don't. So I say, look, it's like you're afraid. They call it anxiety, but you feel that energy? I say, but look, that's what's on the surface. See? Whatever we're experiencing, having done repression work, I know, oh, well, that's safer. Whatever it is. Because that's just how emotional repression works. See, but that person who has anxiety can't see that. Not if they actually have repression. And maybe you're at home and you have anxiety. You might not be able to see it. You wouldn't be able to see it, just like this person. But you might be able to hear it as I explain it and understand it. And this can take you to the next step of actually learning repression inquiry, right? But let me explain it. So if they were here and they had anxiety, I would say, okay, there's the conscious effects of the repression, which I'll just tell them, like, this is the one way of saying it. It's safer for you to just feel anxious here or wherever than it is to feel and express whatever it is that you've buried. It's just safer. That's how the nervous system works. So let's go find out what you buried. And let's say, well, we went into, his mom and dad came up and partner and close friends, and he felt deep into the body where the sense of separation is and said, I'm not angry, I'm not hurt, I'm not sad. Each one at a time. So I'm not angry. Is there any contraction? Only looking for contraction, which is frozen, old, buried emotion. I'm not hurt. Not care about any emotions that arise. Just looking for, where is there a contraction there, as if to indicate I'm hurt, but it's old, frozen, hurt. No longer feels like that emotion. I'm not sad. And see, what we find is then, well, that's the repression, whatever the response is stronger there. And the reason that's important is because this anxiety is being driven by that. Now, how would the person know that, though? Because it's buried, the driver, whatever that emotion, let's just say it's buried hurt. They were hurt when they were a kid. It was not safe in their family to just feel and express hurt or vulnerable emotions. So that emotion could not be felt and expressed. It was then frozen in the body, stored. Now that's the repression. And at the surface, there's anxiety. See, but the anxiety is safer than feeling and expressing the hurt to the person's loved ones. The hurt is buried in that contraction, that particular emotion. Or if it's sadness, that's what's there, buried, or a combination of these, or anger. Once you understand this, this is a framework for understanding. Once you do repression work, this comes from direct experience, actually. This, my friends, is not a belief system. Do not keep yourself safe from your buried emotions by believing that, because you have to do this test, these inquiries, to see that in your own body, this is true for you and in your own experience. Don't believe me. See for yourself. Someone came to me with addiction. I would say, look, it's the same nervous system, the universal mechanism of safety. So there on the surface, here we go, here's the equation again. Something's happening on the surface and the visible consciousness. It's an identified issue like addiction. That's how we stay safe, is like we don't call it what it is. I have childhood buried emotions. I'm afraid of my rage and hurt. And no, we just say, oh, I'm addicted to food. See how that's safer and removed from the buried emotions. So if somebody comes here with addiction, like they used to come to my treatment centers, I say, okay, you are bearing emotions. I mean, of course, addiction, that's the science, right? We have to trust science to a certain degree. So at the surface, here's the addiction. The science says you have buried emotions. Let's go in and see what it is. We go through those emotions. The person discovers that they have the strongest contraction response with anger. So that's the dominant emotion among all the emotions or whatever they hold back. And then we find out, yep, they're just pushing down that anger that they didn't even know they had, because it's just an old frozen emotion and now just feels like contraction. They're just scarfing down cookies or eating this or that to keep that down. They didn't know it. And so their job is to make conscious that buried anger over through a process, so that the addiction lets go of them. It's there to keep them safe. They would learn all that and learn that process by working with me. But they first have to see that the addiction is driven by the anger repression. It's so key. Without that, bypass. Because you're not on the real driver, according to science or your body, if you're off and running in the wrong direction. Let's say somebody comes with chronic fatigue syndrome. I'm not making this up. I'm not a charlatan. Go read the science. Seriously. People might think that, hearing is it everything? People have said that. But see, that's just not being open to trust your body, because there's science around a lot of this, or all of this that I'm saying, and your body. I mean, I may be a charlatan in your eyes. I mean, you have every right to think what you want. My point is, you'd have to also just discount all the science. So when people come, like with chronic fatigue, if they're unsure, I'll say, well, here's how to discover the science, and they'll find it and then come back. We'll do the same thing. So what's on the visible surface? Remember, that's one of the components of understanding repression, where something is at the surface. Person says, well, I call it chronic fatigue, but it looks like this and it feels like this, and my energy level is like this, and it changes in this way. But see, then we go to the contraction, feeling down deep in the body, pulling up people close to her, and going through each one of the tests to see which emotion is frozen in the body and just shows up as a contraction. When we say, I'm not angry, for example, and the body disagrees. I'm not hurt, I'm not sad, I'm not afraid. Okay, so there you go. It's that easy. And so we have to, it's not that easy, but that's what we do. That person then would learn the repression work and start to thaw out, transmute that dense repression of emotion, whatever it is, so that the chronic fatigue, so to speak, would go away. But really, it's their life force coming into awareness. The whatever emotions they buried, anger, whatever, fear. That's how simple this is, but when we're unconscious, it might seem complicated. I totally understand why. I really do, because I sit with people every day, and they'll sit there and go, I'll work with people who I've worked with for a month. They're just still getting started, though. And they'll come back to a session and they'll say, but I really feel like my worthlessness is really what's core, Scott. And it's not really specifically some emotion that I've buried. And if I could help you guys understand what that looks like from my perspective, as someone who's done emotional repression work myself and cleared a lifetime of buried anger, is that it's a complete bamboozle. The person is completely deceiving themselves. And I don't have any energy on it, because I've already done my anger repression work. Fuck, man, I've been fucking pissed at the world. And then I buried it all and was like a peaceful, good person. So I've already dealt with this shit. So when I see somebody lying to themselves, I don't need to be upset about it because I don't have any buried anger to trigger me. But I will say this, though. I'll say, look, last time we were here, you found whatever you found, like buried sadness or hurt or whatever. And if you went back into your body, you would probably find that it's safer. Remember, safety to the nervous system, the unconscious conditioning. It's safer to believe that you're worthless than it is to feel and express anger, hurt, sadness to the people that you love. Keep it simple. Let's go into your body. So then what I would say is, here, remember, what's at the visible level? Worthlessness. See, that's what's conscious. See, every time I work with people, I have to point this out. Whatever you're experiencing, no, that's not repression. Repression drives what you're experiencing. Repression is buried. So you experience worthlessness, but that's actually what I say. Think of it this way. That's an identity. I'm worthless. Right. When you were growing up, it was safer to your consciousness to identify as someone separate and worthless than it was to just have all your power and go in there and get mad at mom and dad or feel hurt and sad and just get over it and move on and be free. Be your authentic self. See that? But you have to go into your body. I would say just go right into your body and see, go through the test. I'm not angry. I'm not hurt. I'm not sad. See where the contraction is. That contraction is the frozen emotion. So that's the emotion or emotions that it's just safer to be worthless than it is to feel and express those buried emotions. And that's how you link it all up. And then there they start the KI repression inquiry practice. I fucking love what I do. I mean, I get chills when I think about it because it's like, my God, I'm going to fucking cry here. I swear. I love what I do. And it's not the money because, I didn't even make enough in some months last year to always pay my bills because of some prior codependency a few years ago that I had to correct. But just, long story. But no, I fucking love what I do because of that, because it's sitting there and watching someone see something that they could never see the root of before. And I couldn't either. Oh, let me explain chronic pain real quick. And even though it's the same thing every time, and people learn the same inquiry and get free in the same way every time that I did, it doesn't get old because I don't have repression. So I don't have to avoid or disconnect or not be my authentic self with people. So every time I'm meeting with somebody, it's not just that, oh, here we go again. You've got the visible effects and then let's go find the repression. Now here's the inquiry. No, it's like each person is a unique person. And I want to connect. Yeah, I don't always want to be doing a session with someone, a paid session, for example, or any kind of session, free or whatever, than something else. Sometimes I'd rather play guitar or sit with Chester or do something. But no, I love sitting with people. And I think the people that I mentor would tell you that it's true, that I love mentoring. And what it is, it's just because... And it's not that I get love and approval by, well, let me spot your repression and just how you missed it. Aren't I great now? Just love me. No, it's not that either. It's just, there's nothing more rewarding than just real human connection. And there's nothing more connecting than just seeing in a relationship or two people, it's like, here's the root of suffering and we're just calling it out directly. Just no holds barred. Basically, that's what this work is. It's just no holds barred and just catching oneself in how we create suffering in each moment. The very mechanism, actually. And that's why I love it, because it's beyond words. It's like a whole new way of relating to people. Crazy. Crazy. Authenticity. That's just crazy, isn't it? Who would have ever thought that authenticity, it would just be the way? This is crazy. What I meant was, it's crazy that through actually addressing directly the emotions that were the scariest, it's the most connecting and obviously authentic and helpful. Relationships, mentoring even, is very helpful. People say, okay, so if somebody else came to me with, okay, chronic pain, I wanted to come back to that. I promise to keep this within an hour. I want to make sure that by the time you leave or stop listening, you get it, that it's okay. I see the components. I see if whenever I'm ready to start, Scott, I know how to do it, or I know where to go to have somebody do it with me. That's my objective here. Loose objective. So if somebody came with chronic pain, well, that's right up my alley, because this work was developed through my my nerve pain. And so if they sat here, I say, see, that's what's visible. Again, we have to go back to what do we see every time is something is visible or conscious. That's driven by something unconscious, buried emotion. So what's conscious is pain. People might say, well, isn't that unconscious? That's really deep in the body. No, it's still visible. You're still conscious of it. You know you have pain, you feel it. Or you even try to avoid it because you know it's there and you don't want to feel it. That's not repression. Those are the visible effects of repression, or the pain is. So now that we know the visible effects, we go into the body, we pull mom and dad and partner, friends up, whoever else, bosses, and say, I don't know if you'd have more than one boss, but we would say, I'm not angry, check for contraction. And then I'm not hurt, I'm not sad, I'm not afraid. Check for contraction, because that's the buried emotion, which whatever, again, it's the thing that you don't feel. So if chronic pain, if somebody said, I feel contraction on hurt. Well, right, you don't feel the emotion of hurt though, see? Or anger. Yeah, or you don't feel the emotion of anger, you feel the contraction, and that's correct. That's repression. So then they would learn that anger repression is creating their chronic pain through that testing there. And by the way, you have to do your own testing. You can't just sit there and listen to my podcast and determine if you have repression, because you actually have to do the inquiry where you say it and feel the response and look and yeah. But anyway, this is what it is like for me every day. So I could just keep going on. I will do a few more scenarios, but I mean, you guys may get bored of hearing it. It's just, to me, it's fascinating because we finally get to the root of suffering. But let me spice it up, like bring it up to next level. And I love this. See, you guys, if you understood how happy I am, even if you don't see a smile on my face, it doesn't matter. Because I used to fake smile through high school. That's why you won't see that. Because smiling used to be so fake for me. You guys didn't know me in high school. I survived grade school bullying by being really good, as I've said, in middle school. And then in high school, I just separated from the bullies and tried to get into a different crowd and a popular one and smiled every fucking day. It was so fake. I just said that on my podcast called Sick Good Boy. And so, yeah, but even if I'm not smiling, trust me, I love my life, and I'm not afraid of death either, which is crazy. But I really, really love, it's not my life. I just love living and being. And I could never have said that before repression inquiry. Seriously. I mean, God, I feel more than blessed. It's like, guys, it's freedom. It's like deep, deep, deep freedom that I never thought I could have. That's why I go to such great lengths. I've lost people because they didn't understand the repression and they were triggered. And I wasn't articulate enough to explain to them, no, the reason that you're leaving is because your system is sabotaging. It's getting triggered. It's feeling shame. It's hating me because it keeps you safe from what you've buried. And that's why you're leaving. It's okay if you don't like me, and that's the real reason you're leaving. It's okay, because it's not, people say, it's not always my repression. And I'll say, okay, but did you actually check into your body to see if it was? Maybe you're just angry at me like you were your dad, and you're just avoiding, like we often do with spiritual stuff. Which brings me to, let's imagine that somebody comes and and they'll say, okay, what about the avoidant pattern? Because that's not really visible, is it, Scott? Because that's something that, say I'm avoiding something, but what is it? And I'd be like, okay, touche, because that's little avoidance is tricky. I mean, if you go onto YouTube, there's just so much talk about it. It's almost like it's really visible. But what is it? It's like the avoidant attachment style, right? I mean, I've lived it my whole life, so I know it's definitely a thing in the visible consciousness. It's like basically just trying to get away from people all the time, but you don't really admit it to yourself and others. You just couch it in other ways, like, I think it's getting pretty late, so I'm going to go home, and I got to get up early. And I know you guys are having fun, but it's been great, but thank you guys. And really, at the unconscious level, you're just like, I'm angry for so many reasons in my life, but I can't express it here, and I don't feel comfortable with being my real self then, and so I'm just going to go home and disconnect. This is just two different lives, like whatever we say at the conscious level, again, something else is going on at the unconscious level. But if someone came to me and said, Scott, how could you show me that the avoidant pattern that I know I have in my life, but I can't see it, that's visible, and that the repression is invisible or unconscious? And I would say, my God, thank you for coming, because it took me how many years now of doing repression inquiry and developing it to be able to answer that question. Because that's like the spiritual bypass. Dan and I found it, the inquiries reveal it. We didn't find it. It's just like if you develop this inquiry, you find the bypass, because you find the emotional repression that creates and manages safety, which then keeps us in a bypass, so we don't get free. Because to get free, you actually have to feel the stuff that you don't want to. But anyway, somebody wanted to sorry, I'm getting really excited because when I think about how many people, really, can I just have a moment here before we go into the avoidant thing? How many people have been in avoidance, in an avoidant attachment style in their relationship? How many people have they never named it? Just never named it. But yet you did, And maybe how many people don't like the label even? Avoidance, or the avoidant attachment. How many people don't even know what it means? And yet they're avoidant. So this is actually really big. That's why I got so excited about this one. And I'm going to continue to be, because if somebody came to me, I would say, look, I'll show it to you. And I'll say, look, what's visible is that you have relationship. And do you notice how you feel disconnected? You might not call it that, but just look, is there real intimacy there? Is there do you feel like you're being authentic with that person or those people and real relationships? And that person would say probably no. I mean, they would probably say, I'm suffering. They would explain it in some other way with different words, but they would say, that's why I'm here with you, Scott. I'd be like, exactly. So see, it's the suffering, or what I would say, disconnection in relationship, that makes us go and then find a person, a path, a teacher, a method, a therapist, whatever, an inquiry. Let's just call all of that a mistress, right? Even cheating on your spouse, like an actual person, a new relationship, or fantasizing about that. Anything to avoid. There you go. But what's happening when we find the mistress? We are also then not getting to the very buried emotions that created the disconnection in the relationship. the original one. And therein lies, and then there's a rinse and repeat over and over again. So what the avoidant pattern is, or the avoidant personality disorder or attachment style, to me boils down to something very simple. And I would show the person this. I would say, you might see that you're disconnecting from your wife. You're going into your room, or maybe you're watching porn, or your spiritual path just never involves her for some reason, or, just like a lot of disconnection and whatever. Maybe you're sleeping in different bedrooms. You don't have sex. You don't, whatever that is, disconnection. Then what's your mistress? Because this is we're still talking about what's visible before we go into the unconscious, So they might say, well, my mistress is KI and meditation. And I fantasize about women sometimes. I'll say all three are part of this mistress, this symbolic mistress, because you're not, in all three of those you're safe. Unless one of them gets to the buried emotions that create the disconnection and separation in the relationship. And then the avoidant pattern would be over. So let's look at these things that make up the mistress. So I say, if you fantasize about these other women, that's what's visible. See? So now we're talking about something that we can actually see that's visible. You have fantasies, thoughts, feelings. There's women that you can they're visible. They're beautiful. Go into your body, how you want to be with them, but then I want you to come back to your wife and your mom and dad and your loved ones and say, I'm not angry. And then there's the contraction if it's there. I'm not hurt. See how everything is the same for me every day with people. I'm not sad. Essentially, it's very different than this, actually. I mean, this is very elementary just to get people started. But it starts this way. And then they would determine, okay, I have these fantasies for these women because it keeps me safe from the buried stuff that creates a disconnection and suffering in my relationship. So I said, well, we better look at the other mistresses, so to speak. So let's say we go to meditation. And I say, what's visible? And maybe the person says, well, it's hard. Meditation is just meditation. You mean I sit down or I sit in meditation, or I just quietly close my eyes and things come and go, and I keep coming back to being that awareness or seeing that I am that, and just being mindful, noticing the quality of attention when something comes and goes. The person's describing it to me. So I said, that's perfect. That's exactly what's visible. So let's work with that. In other words, let's see if that's being driven by repression too. So I'd say, oh yeah, that's what's visible, things coming and going in awareness. Yeah, but see, go into your body. And no, an even better way to approach this actually would be, I would say to them before we went into the body, because see, meditation is a hard one. It's one thing to talk about fantasies about other women, because people feel bad about that sometimes. Well, as their wife would think they should, at least. I don't think they should. They think they should process it and see where it comes from. They should be conscientious of it, is what I meant. They just be aware of it. But so many people have actually said to me, Scott, meditation is different. I'm like, yeah, that's a different mistress, because that's not like cheating on the spouse or doing drugs on the side as a mistress. That's like doing something that's beneficial. There's actually science behind that, the benefits of meditation. The bypass hasn't been studied yet, except for people like, Ken Wilber, but not yet, but it will be. But anyway, I would say, tell me how your meditation practice, if you think, gets to buried emotions. Let's see what's actually visible. Explain what comes up. They might say, well, the feeling of not good enough comes up. And I just sit there and notice those thoughts, and I just sit back as awareness and notice that I'm looking at the thoughts. and there's feelings with them. I say, what feelings are visible? What do you feel? And they'll say, I feel angry. In meditation, sometimes it comes right up there with those thoughts of not good enough, and then there's Dad. And I let all that be. And they say, Scott, see, I can get to the buried emotions, and I am in my meditation practice. This isn't really just a mistress that I'm using to avoid my buried emotions. Same ones that create the problems in relationship. And I'll say, not so fast. Sounds pretty good. But that's what we do in spiritual practice. We bamboozle ourselves just like we do with cheating on our wives and not being able to explain why or where it comes from. Because look, let's go into the body, I would say to the person, and then they would find either buried anger, buried hurt, sadness, fear. And then I would show them the inquiry, the repression inquiry, and they would see that in fact was driving what was visible. And that means that, see, if they feel anger that comes up in meditation, that's because it's safer than the buried hurt or sadness that didn't come up in meditation. The buried hurt or sadness would show up in that test. See, I would pull up mom and dad or whoever, and we would say, I can express the sadness. Because you don't have to just say, I'm not sad. You can say, I can express the sadness. And if there's repression in either case, the body has its own kind of contracted no. Or I can express the hurt. And then they would sense that, okay, there's where the repression is. It's in the body. It's in that contraction. It's hidden. And that's why I'm experiencing anger in meditation, because that's just safer than those more vulnerable emotions that are buried. Now, and then once that person has that understanding, they are just off and running, and their life is going to change. And don't believe me, I tell people when I mentor them, if you don't see benefits in your life, I'm serious. If you do not see positive benefits ongoingly when you're doing KI the way that we developed it, third dimension, then you should quit. If you don't see 2 markers regularly and just benefits of like becoming more authentic and free, or just embodied freedom, and then just quit. I mean, I wouldn't have done it. If your suffering is connected to this and you see it for yourself, but and you're getting the 2 markers consistently, because now that's officially part of this work. In other words, 2 markers means transmuting the repression in the body. That's something pretty specific. It's transmuting the sense of separation when you do it on your own. And your nervous system is regulated enough through that process to keep going, so that you go to the embodied freedom. And I'm so happy to announce that the 2 markers, we sort of voted on it in a way. It's officially a part of this work. But see, that's just it. Once you get these 2 markers on the chronic fatigue, on the energy and the contraction that drives the chronic fatigue or the depression or anxiety, that energy buried in the body, sense of separation, one of the markers is the transmuting of that. The other is regulating the nervous system. Those 2 markers, plus look for the benefits in your life. Like, in other words, chronic fatigue going away, depression going away, my chronic pain went away, these things going away, the avoidant pattern, looking for the mistress. See, because finally you come to KI and you're getting to the buried emotions. The avoidant pattern can even start going away. And if you don't see that, 2 markers and the benefits in your life, then quit KI. But if you're not getting the 2 markers, you're not doing KI. And probably if you're not seeing those kind of benefits, you're not doing KI the right way. So I trust that because I trust my experience. And I've seen so many people trust theirs and experience the same freedom. And I've seen so many people resist. So, okay, that's perfect for the next one, because I promise I'm going to go under an hour, but I also want to give myself an hour here. So let's say so many people throughout in the beginning, when we first started bringing repression work into my teaching, so to speak, me and Dan, we noticed there was this massive resistance to it. And it's only because we've gotten clear that I think we're going to be able to talk about it like I am now, like really directly. Because we lost facilitators, early who were here when the work was in a bypass years ago, and they just hung around. And when we started showing people the bypass and how it was happening for them and how they were doing spiritual practices to avoid something, many of them left. And they might say, well, we left because of this or that reason. They were mad at a facilitator, or a trainer, or me, or Dan, or all of us, or whatever. But no, they have the right to their viewpoint, of course. Fully, they have the right to their experience. But we know enough about this work that, look, it's resistance in most cases. Please, because why wouldn't you want to just? Even if you have a problem with me, please, that's your buried stuff. Come on, I couldn't be that awful. I haven't, slept with any students or anything. Yeah, I've gotten angry from time to time, but if I haven't gotten angry, why would you do this work? Seriously, have you ever thought about that? An anger repressing teacher who repressed anger for so many years, who then says, well, me and my friend have developed anger repression work, and we want to show you guys how to do it. But then I never get angry. And you never hear a story of me getting angry or anything. You should definitely run. That would be definitely fraud. But no, from time to time you will, but I don't store it. That's the whole thing. So I really don't get angry. I can. It's all so overblown, these buried emotions. When you can feel and express everything, it's the most beautiful thing. And then you get free because you don't become identified with things. We become identified with things because we hold back other things that are scarier. So we just get identified with what's safer, which brings me to resistance and the people that left. If I could bring them in a room right now, all of them, even if they hate me, some of them, they don't all hate me. Some of them hate Dan or Ina or Serena or whoever, because it's shadows and we're not perfect. Thank God I don't have to be good or perfect. No, I am not, and I can't be bad, but not intentionally. It's just that I'm just being myself. And that can be problematic, you'll see. I don't care, though, because I tried to be good for everybody my whole life. And a lot of these people that left were like that. They were people that had to be good. Many of them were anger repressors. And some of them were even in training. Some of them were even facilitators, as I said. But if they could all be here, if you're listening, if you could come into a room with me, or if you know how to do this, do it. Is that look at what's visible when it comes to any kind of resistance. Screw KI. Maybe you're resisting like work, or maybe you're resisting KI, or resistance is just like being against something. It's just, or like wanting to do something but still can't. It's that kind of like life resistance. If you can't make that visible, then why are you even listening to this? Because you're not suffering. Because life is resistance in a way. One way of saying it. Until it's not. So bring it up. Where is it visible in your life? Let's all do it together. Let's say we're all doing it, even you listening. Come on, you're driving in the car. Just don't wreck. You're listening to this podcast. Look at the resistance in your life. What are you wanting to do in your life, but for some reason, you just don't do it? And I want to say to the people, if they were here, all those old friends, or they weren't friends, it's just people who hung around the work for a while and then left. If they were here, look at the resistance in your life. Maybe it's with me. Maybe it's with your partner. Maybe it's just resistance to life, to everything. And then that's what's visible. See, it may come up as a story that says, I used to like Dan better. once he did anger repression work, I just noticed he's not as nice. I'd be like, I should hope not. That was his trauma response. But let's just say, that's what I mean by when you do anger repression work, or like when you do codependency work. Well, look, if you do real work, you're not going to be looking or trying to cultivate more loving kindness and compassion. You're going to say, fuck no, I have to stop taking care of other people and take care of myself now. My God, and my own trauma and repression that makes me want to fix or change or help or save or do something for other people. Freedom has to look healthy. That's why it's freedom. But anyway, with resistance, you can see how it's visible, right, guys, in your life? Everybody sees it? Okay, now if everybody goes into the body and where the sense of separation is, if you haven't done this already, do it now. Look at parents, friends, everyone. I'm not angry. See where that same resistance to life, see if you can feel it in your body, the core of it. I'm not angry. Do you feel contraction? Please, please, if anyone out there is listening right now and is not doing this after listening to me for an hour, please do this. Just so you know for yourself. I'm not hurt. As you look at dad or mom, to see if that same core resistance is actually something buried. I'm not sad. Or how about I can get angry at them. See if there's a contraction that says, in its own way, no. I can get angry at people. I can cry in front of people. See if there's a contraction. I can show my hurt. See, where's the contraction? And then there's the core, there's the producer of the resistance. What I tell people is resistance is really repression. Repression is the core resistance, because these are the scariest emotions. They're so scary that we have buried them such that they don't even feel like emotions anymore. That would make sense since they're buried. But see how they're responsible for everything that's visible and conscious. That's the key. The key is making the link. And why would you? Because it's unconscious, between what's visible and conscious, and therefore, and the other part, which is buried and unconscious. I hope you guys can see that really the greatest duality is within us. That we have this unconscious that's just angry, hurt, sad, or afraid, and is buried. And then at the conscious level, it's just whatever is safer than that. And it keeps arising because it's safer. It's safer. We get love. We stay safe by bearing certain things. At the unconscious level, it's just about safety and love. And at the conscious level, in other words, we're just holding, back our emotions. We don't admit that to ourselves at the conscious level, though, that everything is just about safety and love. We have our stories. We have our depression. See that? We have our anxiety. We have our chronic pain. We have our spiritual seeking. We have our suffering. That's what we see at the conscious, visible level. And that is the bamboozle, because hopefully you've begun to see today that at the unconscious level, it's just, I have these buried emotions, which obviously can't feel and express them, and means I have to stay safe by keeping them buried. And then by keeping them buried, I get love as a separate self. Once you really, really understand it, you've got the key. You don't even have to have that first session with me. The question is, do you need any session with me or any other trainer? Probably yes. And we'll leave you this last couple of minutes with a little bit more guidance than I usually do, since the whole point of the podcast episode was to give you something very practical to make a connection here between these things. So this last very short segment, just a few minutes, we'll do that. Oh, real quick, by the way, with the avoidant stuff that we were talking about, we would also find conditioning in the body that's just basically saying, get away. As I've been saying, it's just a trauma response, fear response, getting away from people, and really just getting away from our own buried emotions. I just forgot to mention that is part of it. So what I would say is, I want to give people a little bit more guidance as to where to go. I want to say a few things, even if it takes more than a few minutes. It won't take more than like 5 here from this point forward, in case you're driving and you're close to your destination. We've definitely seen that it's difficult for people to, even though they may resonate or be interested or just curious, for them to really understand what the science is saying. And I couldn't get it either. Guys, I had to become suicidal. I've been telling you on this podcast, these episodes, I had to become suicidal and have 2 diseases and an addiction after a shift to non-dual, the initial shift, not the whole embodiment, non-dual realization. I'm a living example of how powerful the driver of suffering really is, because I've actually had a non-dual experience since 2007. But it just wasn't fully embodied, and so suffering had to continue in more covert ways, like, well, chronic nerve pain and relational patterns that I couldn't see. So the reason I'm saying this is because I understand how difficult it is to put sort of 2 and 2 together, which is to see that there's this at the visible conscious level, but that it's driven by something that we can't see, by what Serena, one of our great trainers, says is the missing experience, the emotions that are buried, that which doesn't feel like emotion anymore. It's just this sense of contraction, separation. I know how difficult it is. I also want you to know, though, there are 2 things that are working against you. And if you can catch these 2 things, you'll probably be okay. And you'll get the help you need here if you need our help or just get the do-it-yourself thing. 2 things. Not only are we unconscious to this connection between what's visible and then what's buried, but our nervous system seeks safety. That's the other one, which means that unless we here are offering safety on some level, some energetic level, your nervous system might not be drawn to it in the way that you're drawn to other things. Or it might be drawn in a different way. Let's just say that, drawn a different way, which means it might bring up resistance, and yet you stick around. That makes sense, actually, because there's something in you that is not just so avoidant that you just leave because you don't like something that I say, or you're quick to just, choose another mistress, and one that doesn't get to buried emotions too, which would be, part of the avoidant pattern. I'm really inviting people to pay attention to how you might go to certain things and sit, like we said, like meditation. That was one of the examples I gave today. And that just regulates the system. Certain many forms of meditation just do that, like we explained. And they don't get to the buried stuff. So why is that important? Because that's your system seeking safety. And I've watched people early in mentorship here where they don't see themselves doing that. By the way, there's nothing wrong with meditation. I highly recommend it, actually. And Serena, I recommend the ones that Serena, our trainer, does too. She's got some good ones. But if you don't understand the difference, if you just keep going to meditation and not understanding that that's not getting to the buried stuff, and then that keeps you from doing repression inquiry, well, that is a problem, because that's the bypass, to not see that. But see, once you see it, you can go to meditation and incorporate that wisely with this work. So the point is you have a reason not to come and do this work, because we're not appealing directly to your need for safety. And instead, I want to appeal to you to your higher reasoning, which is your awareness, even if you don't know what you really are, there's something here that's awake. I want to appeal, even if there's suffering there, I want to appeal to that which is here. And I want to say to that the system will continue to create suffering as long as you do not investigate that the unconscious conditioning in the sensations in the body. You may want to run and hide from this. You may not be interested. You may stay just curious. You may even be avoidant of what we're doing here. You may love bomb us in the beginning and think this is great and then disconnect because you sabotage. We've seen all of it. But you should know that one of the reasons is because you seek safety, and we're not promising that. And I'll tell you this, we actually are. We just don't lead with it. See, the two markers that we have when you do this repression inquiry are, one is you transmute the actual repression in the body. The energy actually dissolves, changes, you'll see it each time you do it until it's just cleared. And that's what gives us the freedom. And that's what we come here for, of course. But then the other marker is that the system, through the inquiry, feels safe enough to continue and actually more regulated, not less, from doing the work. When both markers are there, you get freedom and it's safe. In other words, there's nothing to be scared of here. Nothing at all. Unless you just don't care about learning the work the way we developed it. And then you could bypass and stir things up, and then that's different. But if you do it under our guidance, or the way that we show you on the Do-It-Yourself course, which I'll put the links to both mentorship and our Do-It-Yourself course in the description of this podcast, you'll be fine and safe. And I'll leave you with one more thing. See, the promise of awakening or enlightenment or the special states out there, you have to be really careful. Because there's really a deep freedom available, actually. It's tremendously available. But whether there's a path to that in a particular place that you're at, or a teacher or practice or method or therapist, whether there's a pathway to that freedom for you is a completely different question. And there's a massive bypass out there. So when you put these two things together, the seeking of safety and then all the promises out there, can you see how your system would be led very easily on any avoidant pattern or seeking pattern because you're not getting to the buried emotions that drive it? So I definitely invite you, once you take our repression test and get on our newsletter, repressiontest.com, to discover that even the seeking, the visible seeking in your life, is coming from the same buried emotions. Thank you for listening.